You've got media from some school newspapers, you've got the radio, we've got the Dubuque Telegraph Herald, Manchester Radio, all sorts of people. I just wanted you to know that they're from various areas.
It was good to see you.
Okay. Put that right there. Hopefully it's not in anyone's way.
Okay. You tell me when you're ready. I think I'm ready now.
Okay.
Yeah, I will. We can just start with you and go down the line. Question piece.
You said during the meeting that you changed your feelings on whether or not Russia meddled in the election. Does that change any of your thoughts on
No,
the memo?
I said I hope the president changed his mind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I misheard you.
I think this is a wonderful opportunity for the president to express if something worked out different than what he anticipated. I think it would really help him as well as the American people confidence in him if he would say, you know, I've been saying all along that they never meddled. Now we know they did, and I was wrong, and he wouldn't have to say this, but I hope sometime he gets those sanctions put in. I voted for him. I didn't say out there, but maybe I ought to say for all of you, traditionally over 75 years, there's been a lot of things in foreign policy where Congress passes something, but it leaves a great deal of discretion to the president when to institute it or whether to institute at all. And another example where Congress passed something in 1994 that we ought to move our embassy to Jerusalem, well, 3 presidents passed it up. They didn't enforce it. You know, it'd fall into the same category, but this president decided to go ahead and do it.
So, Senator, we just saw a lot of angry people out there, a lot of them talking about gun control, wanting some kind of action. What was your feeling towards the kind of atmosphere that this crowd brought and their frustration over what some call political inaction?
Well, first of all, it's very legitimate what they're doing. Whether they do it here with me or whether they march or whether they go to the city council meeting or what. It strengthens our democracy, the more people that participate in it, and this is a highly emotional issue. I wish people would get worked up about as much about 650 people being murdered last year in Chicago, where they outlaw all guns, you know. And but the point is that these are children, and I think that's gets the extra attention. And when you send your kids to a school, you would expect them to be safe. That's what we've always done. And so it's perfectly legitimate, and I hope I can help them, and I think in 4 areas I can help them. In fact, I think maybe today getting the FBI to, as you heard me say, to brief my staff on what went wrong at the FBI may be something where that mistake won't be made again. But the bump stock and the database for FBI being updated and get names in there are 2 things that we were working on before we had Parkland.
A lot of people were also discussing along the same lines about assault rifles, that regardless of what legislation is being considered right now, it's the assault rifle, the weapon itself, that is being used in these shootings that is causing the harm, the quick harm. Do you believe, despite what you're saying for these other legislations that you're in favor of, that after all that's said and done, that these assault rifles, that these types of situations will go away or will lessen?
Yeah. We had assault rifle ban nationally, 94 to 2004. It had a 10-year sunset, and it did sunset. We didn't know whether it would accomplish the goals that we wanted to accomplish, which obviously would be to reduce crime and reduce murders. We instituted a study that was supposed to go on during that period of time, and it did result in a study done by the National Institute of Justice, which is within the Department of Justice, and that study concluded that it didn't cut down on crime and it didn't cut down on murders. And so consequently, you don't want to be passing legislation, just pass legislation. You want to pass legislation for a reason, and if we're trying to lessen murders, you know, we ought to target those things that would actually lessen murders. And I think that the example of the Baptist church, where 25 people were massacred, is a perfect example. The U.S. Air Force wasn't doing its job. It didn't turn that name over to the FBI because that guy shouldn't have had guns.
Yes, sir. Iowa's water keeps getting worse, more polluted, and of course we're contributing to the dead zone in the Gulf. The EPA told Iowa to do something about it. We are in a voluntary program that's not working. I wonder what you can do in the agriculture bill to help clean up our water.
Yeah.
The application of nitrogen fertilizer and the proliferation of CAFOs all contribute to this. So what can you do?
Yeah, I think CAFOs are pretty well regulated from the standpoint of you have to have manure programs, and you can only put so much of one type of manure on a certain acre of land, and if those are, and there's every reason to believe that those are going to be enforced. If they aren't, then it's an enforcement problem and not a policy problem. Then at the federal level with the Farm Bill, what I would do is make sure that we get more land in CRP, one thing, and then make sure that the acronym is EQIP, that there's plenty of money in EQIP that's used for, one of the things they're trying to push for is to make sure that tiles have, I forget what you put at the end of a tile, but it's kind of costly, but it's very much for settling out nitrates before they get into the water at the end of the tile line, things of that nature.
Any question?
Senator Grassley, many students...
I should say something else because EPA director came to the state fair, I think 2013, and this was an Obama person. And she was, it was a program about our voluntary approach in Iowa, and she said that it would meet federal law, and she said that it would work by meeting the laws. So there is, plus what the state legislature just did by putting $248 million, I think it's $248 million into the cleaning up the water. See, go ahead.
So many students at my school, especially after learning that both the FBI was informed and that a guard at the school was not able to act, feel that measures such as the 1994 federal assault weapon ban should be reinstated. Students have brought up that you voted against it in 1994, and in 2013, following Sandy Hook, in an interview with Radio Iowa, you said the FBI would be able to handle cases of reports of people with mental illness. However, obviously they've shown that they are not able to handle these claims, and because of that, 17 children are dead. Isn't it time to reinstate that ban?
No, and I'll go back to what I told this lady. We did have that on the law in the books. It had a specific requirement that the National Institute of Justice study. Did it have an impact on crime, and did it have an impact on murders? And at the end of the 10-year period of time, in 2004, they released their study, and they said that it did not cut down on crime, and it did not cut down on murders. So you want to do those things that accomplish something. And by the way, it originally passed in 1994, probably with 60-some votes, and the last time it was up as confirmation that people were following the study, it only got about 40 votes. Okay.
NRA.
You have a question?
You mentioned that this was a pretty heated town hall, pretty passionate compared to some that you've had this week. Looking back over your career, over the past, how many years, how does this time in government compare to the 80s, the 90s? Are people more passionate right now?
I think the only thing that would be close to this would be 2009 and 10 when the Tea Party people were getting started. And they were passionate. The difference between the two times is a lot of these people probably have a different political philosophy than I do, and so they may not agree with me on a whole lot, that don't like some of the positions I take, Yeah, in 2009-10, it was all my friends that were mad at me.
Thank you.
Senator, unless you have...
Nope.
Okay. I have one quick question for you. We've got Senator Sanders, who's kind of stumping through the state right now, talking about repealing the tax reform that got through Congress. What are your opinions on that? And do you think this is politically motivated maybe for 2020?
The tax cuts are working from the standpoint that people in their February paycheck, the average is for Iowa, and this comes from the Department of Revenue in Des Moines, family of 4 getting $1,790 reduction in taxes, mostly because of the increase in the standard deduction, doubling it, and doubling the child tax credit. And they are going to need that money based on this, and it's going to turn over many more times in the economy than if we left it in the federal treasury, because when we spend it, there's always political things involved, and most of the time you spend your money, they're not political decisions made, it's just family and the things you need, and so it does much more economic good. So we're seeing Apple bringing home $348 billion as a result of it. That would still be stacked overseas, and they're going to have to pay $30 billion in taxes on that $348 billion. And so that money is going to be invested here, and Apple's going to create 20,000 jobs because of the decrease in the corporate tax rate. In addition to Apple, we've got car manufacturers setting up 2,500 jobs in Detroit instead of in Mexico. We're seeing the middle class getting a tax cut, and you're seeing the middle class getting the biggest percentage cut. You're seeing the most wealthy people in this country getting the smallest percentage tax cut. And I think you're going to see that it's going to enhance the economy, and I wouldn't see why anybody, when 3.5 million people can get bonuses for more than 300 companies, and when companies are raising their starting wage, all the benefits that have come from it already are pretty obvious. I would think that there wouldn't be anybody that would want Bernie Sanders to say we ought to tax you more, because the problem isn't for reducing the deficit, taxing people more. The problem is economic growth and more taxpayers, not more tax rates, not higher tax rates. Because when you have a 50-year average of the federal government raising $1, and they get a license to spend $100.13, you never get ahead that way. So we don't have a taxing problem, we have a spending problem.
Senator, Republicans don't like the ACA and weren't able to put together anything to replace it. Wonder if maybe a third alternative of Medicare for all might be appropriate for the Senate and the House to enact.
Yeah.
I believe the President is not averse to that.
He better be, because this is what will happen if he's not averse to it. Every year, the trustees of the Social Security and Medicare system issue a report looking ahead 75 years. Medicare won't exist after 2030. Social Security will go way down in reimbursement, about 75% of what I get today, because the surplus is going to run out. So I happen to believe, and I hope the President believes, after 180 years of Social Security and 60 years of Medicare, it's part of the social fabric of America and ought to be maintained. So you're asking me, should we load on everybody else in America on a system that's going broke? That's what happened to Obamacare. You know, it's supposed to only cost $960-some billion over a period of 10 years starting in 2013. It ended up costing $2 7/10 trillion. So, you know, the more you get government involved in healthcare, the more it's screwed up.
Senator.
You don't act like you agree with me.
Well, I'm thinking nobody's there to rein in the insurance companies and the pharmacy companies. The government decided not to negotiate prescription prices to put them under control. The insurance companies
Yeah.
are leaving Iowa because they can't make enough money. Do you believe people should be able to make a profit from people's health concerns?
As long as you're going to have a free market system, they'll have to make a profit or they won't be in business. So there's 4 things on pharmaceuticals. One, do away with the pay-for-play provision where companies have their patent run out, then they make a deal with a generic company to keep it going for a few years, pay them a lot of money, so they keep the price up there. Another one is, we could get more generics on the market if we made the pharmaceutical companies, when their patent runs out, sell their supplies to the generics so they can get faster approval by FDA. And the other one is, and by the way, I'm co-sponsors on all those bills, and then the other one is to do away with, or to have the importation of drugs. So if you import drugs that meet our FDA standards, you're going to have more competition, that's going to drive the price down. And a perfect example, not dealing with pharmaceuticals, but Senator Warren and I sponsored the bill so we can get cheaper hearing aids for people. If you need a hearing aid today, it's going to cost you $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. Let's see. Only 1 out of 7 people that have hearing problems can afford that. So our bill will allow people that are lesser income, still have hearing problems, be able to get hearing aids that work. So there's a lot we can do without putting everybody on Medicare and screwing up Medicare. Because I want to preserve Medicare. I want to improve it. I want it to last beyond 2030.
This will have to be the last question. Yeah, Senator, I know it's been a while since beginning, like one of the first questions that was asked was about DACA and the confidence in getting something approved by the March deadline. Why have we come to this point? I've talked to a lot of DACA recipients in the past who felt like their status, their position in this country, their confidence that they could be here has been sort of moved around across the table. Why is it that we cannot find a solution comprehensively bipartisan, and what draws back on both ends of the aisle to come up with a solution that addresses the dreamers first and then security later?
Yeah, well, to answer your first question, the agenda of the United States Senate has been such, it's been tied up with government shutdown and with the getting budget agreements and getting the tax bill through and all that stuff. And then next week's a perfect example of why something as important as DACA can't come up next week, is the Democrats are filibustering every bill. So not every bill, every judge. So next week we're going to spend all next week just going through the elongated process of going through filibusters, voting them down, and then passing these people overwhelmingly. But it's just, if we could get more cooperation, so we don't spend all of our time on human resource issues, meaning approving judges and cabinet people, then we'd have more time for legislation. So that's one of the problems. The other one is we will have a bipartisan agreement, or you never get anything through the United States Senate. So this is what we accomplished last week, even though 2 different votes didn't get 60 votes. You've had the Democrats never wanting to appropriate any money for a wall. So all but 3 Democrats voted for $25 billion for a wall in a bill that didn't get 60 votes, but we got them on record. And then you have a large share of the Republican caucus that never wanted to give a path to citizenship. And so you got all but 11 Republicans on record of willing to give a path to citizenship. Now you got to prove that to people that they're willing to move, and that vote proved it. And so that's a big step towards getting a bipartisan agreement. Now the House doesn't have to have a bipartisan agreement because they don't have to have a supermajority. So if they get 218 votes of Republicans, they can move through.
Can you explain how the 25 isn't for just a wall?
Oh yeah. border security. It would be probably a third of it, yeah, maybe about 11 or 12 would be for a wall, but not 2,300 miles of wall, probably about 1,500 miles, of which we've already got 654 in place. And then improvement of some of it. In fact, there's some parts of it being improved right this very day, I heard on the news. Then the others would be for additional immigration judges, so we don't have people languish before there's a decision made, additional border patrol, and the electronic surveillance. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.